So I sort of came across like this pretty cool area here, like this old manor house here, and then this is obviously an old mill. Pretty neat. And another cool old stone house up there, and another one right here. It's just like, it's probably like one of these old like plantations where there's a bunch of different houses, and then there's a really neat church there. We just were at Topahawken UCC, old barn here, and then here's the cemetery. So we're actually going to go over to the church and maybe talk about that, maybe visit this cemetery as the next video. Cool like little park here and sort of water system that goes around here as well. It's pretty neat actually. So I'm going to see if I can find a way over to that church to be able to visit that and find out what it is. But I'm going to probably do a little bit more research on this and then do some audio file work to just explain what it actually is, because I never knew that was there. That was sort of neat. I just decided to take a run back through here to check out, trying to find like what this church is and maybe its history. So anyway, so we're gonna go run over there. I'm gonna quick do the historical marker here for this John Schultz, and then we'll go down to the church. Thanks everybody. Alright, so here's another really cool thing. I was just going down to Stoutsburg and I came across this. I don't know if this is like an old furnace or what this is, but it really has this sort of that shape where they'd be burning stuff. It's probably a much smaller scale, but maybe part of this overall area that there's a whole bunch of stuff here. So there's more things that I want to. Alright, so I'm going to do a little bit more videoing here. This is we did a video on Christ Lutheran Church, and that is right over there. Beautiful church, beautiful cemetery, really impressive stones. This is the find that I had never been back through here before. There's a whole slew of old stone buildings. It's just all in one area, and I had thought, like I'd said originally, maybe this was like a plantation or something, but the more research I do, the more it sounds like this is actually just, a lot of it has to do with Christ Lutheran Church there, but I think a lot of them have to do with this mill that's here. This mill that's in the front here is called Allsballs. I have to look at so I get that correct again, but that is actually a mill, or was at one time, part mill, part home. But there's also this other building back here, which they said that was potentially a mill as well. And there's another building I see right back there as well. But anyways, those buildings, the one there in particular, the ruins one, was possibly the first mill in this area. And anyways, there's a couple stories with that, which I'll wind out giving those and talking about what the names potentially were. But it also could have been the first parsonage and the school for the church. So, and even like with the mills, back then, I think a lot of times we don't always realize how many buildings are involved, because like it would have been like the major employer in the area. And doing a little bit of a naughty here, but forgive me. But anyways, they would have had a number of buildings. Like you would have sometimes had a mansion with that mill, because they usually were pretty well off, especially when they were stone buildings like this. But they said that this could have a number of these different buildings, because there's a house up on the hill there as well. It's another stone house. It's just unusual to see this many houses and buildings of stone that are all in one area. But that, like I said, it sounds like it was a mill complex. Potentially, if the other building was the first mill, that might have been the Schultz mill. And we had done a video on John Andrew Schultz, who was the 6th governor of Pennsylvania. His father, Christian Schultz, was actually the pastor there at Christ Evangelical Church, and they said it could have been called Schultz Mill. So quite potentially, and they were, you know, his wife would have been a Muhlenberg, so there would have been money behind them as well. But we'll talk more about that. I'm going to put up some pictures of these so you can see them a little closer, and then talk about a little bit more about what the names of the actual mills would have been, and just give you what history I can. Thanks, everybody. And we'll also be talking about there's a furnace that we came across actually right down this road, so we'll stop here in a second because we'll take a quick peek over that as well as I'm taking you along here on the journey. There's also to the left here as you're coming down into Stoutsburg. I kept on saying it wrong. For some reason I was saying Stouts as in Stouds, and it is actually Stouts, like ST, and that's it right there. You can see that a little bit. Right aside of the road. I've never seen that before. A little bit too small to be an iron furnace. Cliff and I had talked about, we do believe it was probably actually a lime kiln. So they would take the limestone in there and they would wind out burning it basically, and they'd make this white powder that you could put on your fields and things like that. So another cool house here as you're going into Stoutsburg, but I might not even be pronouncing it there right either, because there's a nice historic district in here, and I always thought it was cool when they had the trees that they planted, like how old they are, because down near Annville, my region, there was an area of the road that they used to have these trees on both sides of the road, and it was sort of common for farmers to do that. It just sort of created a really nice scenic area, and unfortunately the one side they cut them all down, and then they started cutting down quite a few of the other ones too. But we are going to go over here. There's a cemetery here that I was completely unaware of, that Cliff told me about, that's got probably more age than any of the other ones down in this area, and some of those are quite old. But there's some more Zeller history down here as well. All right, thanks everybody.
So I promised we would talk about these several of these buildings. Most of what I know is that this isn't like a plantation or anything. It's probably a lot of the buildings have to do with both Christ Lutheran Church and this particular mill. This is called the Hershberger Mill. They said that it started operation around 1820, which would have been right around the region of time that the Union Canal would have come through. They actually believe now the stone portion is a bit earlier than that, probably 18th century, which would be 1700s. When exactly it was built, nobody really knows. The building next to it, which is the ruins, that's the one that they talk about, that is the old Ansbach Mill, or the Schultz Mill. Christian Schultz was the third pastor of Christ Lutheran Church. He was also the father of John Andrew Schultz, who was the 6th governor of Pennsylvania. And it's assumed, he was pretty well off because he was married into the Muhlenberg family. His wife was a Muhlenberg sister of, she was the daughter of John Muhlenberg and the sister of Henry Augustus Muhlenberg. And if I said John Muhlenberg, is Henry Muhlenberg was the father. But they had quite a bit of money. They were a political dynasty, and that would have made sense. But the story sounds like actually that ruined building was the original parish and a school, and it makes sense because there's a wall, as you can see, right down the center. There are too many fireplaces, too ornate to be a mill. There is a run through there to allow the water access to the other mill, so there is a story there as well that it was a neighbor was spiteful when the Union Canal came through. It cut water off to the Ansbach Mill, and then they decided to build a mill out of spite. It's an interesting story, but sadly not true. Well, good that it's not true for the people involved. The last piece that I wanted to talk about was this furnace that I found out right outside of Stoutsburg as you're going in there. And it's literally right off of 422, but you can see it from the road that goes to Stoutsburg. We don't believe this is an iron furnace. We believe it's an a lime kiln is what Cliff and I have come to the conclusion. It just makes more sense. And with that, we'll say goodbye, and we'll see you about town.